Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this briefing on the City of Philadelphia's response to rising gun violence. This is for press only. If you're not a member of the press, you could please log out and you can watch the live stream on the City of Philadelphia's Facebook page. Joining us today are a number of officials, in addition to Mayor Kenny. We have Erica Atwood, the Senior Director for the Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives in criminal justice and public safety, as well as Dr. Ruth Abaya, Injury Prevention Program Manager for the Department of Public Health, Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw, Deputy Commissioner Joe Dales, and Deputy Commissioner Benjamin Nash. And we are pleased to be joined today as well by Pastor Carl Day of the Culture Changing Christians Worship Center. We'll start off today with comments from Mayor. Mayor, you have the floor.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. As I mentioned at the last briefing, today we're going to share an update on the Philadelphia Roadmap to Safer Communities. This violence reduction strategy was launched 2 years ago. As the pandemic raged, so did our other epidemic, gun violence. In addition to more than 3,000 Philadelphians who died from COVID in 2020, we lost 447 Philadelphians to gun violence. And there were 1,799 non-fatal shooting victims, alive, but still suffering from devastating trauma and loss. Knowing that we are not alone in the struggle, that cities across the country have seen this violence spike, it is no comfort. These deaths, like those we lost due to COVID, were preventable. And we are doubling down on our commitment to tackling gun violence as a public health crisis. It's not just a law enforcement issue. Erica Atwood, our Senior Director for Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety, will share the bulk of the update. Our presentation will include the elements that are targeted to the people and neighborhoods that are at the highest risk of gun violence. This also includes new investments in the coming fiscal year. In fact, in the fiscal year 22 budget and 5-year plan we're presenting to Council this week, you'll see that the administration dedicates a total of $18.7 million of additional funding in FY22 on anti-violence efforts for a total of $35.5 million of investment. Over the life of the 5-year plan, this is an additional investment of $70 million. But even as we increase resources and scale the evidence-based programs for those who are at the highest risk, we are continuing our largest investments in what we know will ultimately address the structural root cause of violence, lack of education and opportunity. And you will see our continued commitment to making sure Philadelphia's children and young adults have the chance to get a quality education that will help them see a future beyond the violence in their own neighborhood. Over the next 5 years, our investments in education in the School District of Philadelphia, in community schools, PHL pre-K, out of school time, summer jobs, and at the Community College of Philadelphia total more than $1.4 billion over 5 years. And as we turn the corner on COVID, we are working urgently to bring back an ambitious and expanded series of summer 2021 activities for our kids and youth, keeping them engaged and safe by reopening pools, expanding programming at recreation centers, libraries, and much more. In fact, at the next briefing in 2 weeks, Cynthia Figueroa, Deputy Mayor for the Office of Children and Families, will share more detail on all of our summer planning. We're also making major investments and changes to how we respond to 911 calls to safely meet residents' needs. The FY22 budget includes $13.2 million investment scaling over the year so that 911 callers citywide can receive help from a co-response team or a mobile crisis team, if that's what they need. And we are staying committed to our criminal justice reform efforts, ultimately improving safety by reducing unnecessary and disproportionate contact with the justice system and incarceration for Black and brown Philadelphians. This is how we will ultimately prevent further violence and save lives. Now I want to turn it over to Erica to provide details on the plan.
Thank you, Mayor Kenny. So I wanted to start with some level setting. The Roadmap to Safer Communities is our 5-year plan. It was launched in 2019, and in 2019, we spent a good amount of time getting our infrastructure ready, getting our city ready, city departments ready for the implementation of the strategy. Year 2 was the implementation of the strategy, and year 2 was 2020. And so we are refocusing our efforts around implementation of the strategy. And given the pandemic, there are some clear pivots we had to make to the strategy to make sure that we were being responsive to what we were seeing on the ground, given the pandemic and given the rise of gun violence. Next slide. So let's address the impact of COVID. With COVID-19, we had to kind of pull back the reins a bit, reassess what we were doing, and also kind of pay attention to what was happening, not just here in Philadelphia, but across the country. There was a $750 million budget gap that needed to be closed, which required some painful cuts. Next slide. But in spite of that, we were able to really make some efforts towards meeting folks where they are in a safe way. We were able to put forth for example, we were able to stand up our gun violence intervention, group violence intervention program, which was originally supposed to launch in April of 2020. We had to delay that, but we were able to do it. And the pivots we were able to make is instead of calling people in, we went to people's homes, and we were able to stand up not only kind of the enforcement sides of the efforts, but also the social service sides of the efforts. And even though we as a department had been impacted by COVID, having a number of our members of our community crisis intervention program contract COVID, we were still able to move forward, and we were able to meet folks' needs in a very different way, down to kind of the big little things, granular level, making sure folks had groceries, folks had diapers and formula for their kids. Those were the types of needs that we saw that we had to address, even as a violence prevention entity in our communities. Next slide. But we have to stay the course. We have a strategy. We know what we have to pay attention to. We have to pay attention to connecting and making sure what young people and their families are thriving. We have to have stronger community engagement. We have to better coordinate our city services and our planning for our efforts. And at the core of everything, at our foundation, we have to have safe and healthy communities. And part of that pivot is in how we're looking to elevate the importance of this work is we've moved the roadmap out of just the Office of Violence Prevention, but now we have it in my office, and I'm reporting directly to the managing director in our Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety. We know that gun violence is a multi-pronged, multi-solution effort, and that is how we're approaching it now. And in that effort, we've even moderated the leadership of the efforts. And next slide. And you'll see that we've restructured it. The co-chairs, along with myself, are Commissioner Outlaw and Dr. Ruth Abaya, who is the manager of our injury prevention program within the Philadelphia Department of Public Health. Next slide. And so what are we doing? What's new, and what are we deepening our investments in? And so there's a lot of conversation around job stop bullets. And so we're looking at putting quality job opportunities and training designed for individuals who are at the highest risk of gun violence and who are experiencing trauma as a result of that. We're expanding our community crisis intervention program, as well as our group violence intervention program, to address kind of the widening scale of gun violence happening in our neighborhoods. And so to build off the programs that we know that work on a local and a national level, we're investing $1.3 million into expanding these programs, directly working with individuals in vulnerable communities. We're expanding our environmental communities response efforts. This means blight remediation, cleaning of lots, the physical things that you see in neighborhoods that are vulnerable to gun violence. We're making deeper investments in that. We're bringing behavioral health services where they're needed. Our communities are experiencing trauma. And as we are thinking about going to where people are, the city is investing $7.2 million in the expansion of our mobile crisis teams and our Philadelphia crisis hotline. We're expanding our services to reentering individuals as well as their families. We've done a feasibility study. We've done all the budgeting. We are going to launch our first neighborhood resource center to reduce recidivism in Philadelphia this year. This is based off a model that we've seen nationally that will bring programs and supports to neighborhoods as a one-stop shop to provide access to citywide resources and community-based providers for a broad range of holistic reintegration, restorative, and wellness opportunities to build trust between individuals who have been impacted by the criminal justice system and their neighborhoods. And last but not least, we're expanding our investments in our neighborhood-led interventions. We announced our new grantees for our targeted community investment grants the last time you saw us. We are continuing those investments, and we will invest an additional $500,000 in these grants to support what we know is working on the ground. Next slide. Like the mayor said, we cannot ignore what the root causes are to what we're seeing in our neighborhoods. And so as we think about the solutions, as we are addressing the issues, we are also addressing the intersectionality of issues that we see around education, poverty and economics, civic engagement and built environment, as well as community health. And community health is a physical and as well as the mental. And we're going to track what we're doing and how this is working, not just from a quantitative aspect. We're not just going to count beans, but we're also going to talk about the quality of life and what it feels like to be in our neighborhoods and how we are moving the needle on that. Next slide. And how we are tackling this is from a geographic approach. We have to understand and realize what is happening in our neighborhoods. And so we're doing this kind of in a concentric circle model, is we're looking at what are the areas in which are experiencing violence? And it's not just about kind of what is wrong in the neighborhoods. I'll talk a little bit more about what is right in the neighborhoods. And so we're looking at broader areas, zip codes, police districts, and then we're nuancing it down to what's happening in our neighborhoods. What are the shootings and arrests, and what are the assets that are actually there as well? And so what are we putting on the table, and what are our partners that exist in these neighborhoods? And then lastly, and what is most critical, we're going block by block. And so when we look at our pinpoint areas, we look at what's happening in a block like 5100 block of Chester Avenue, as an example. What's happening there? What are the assets there? What are the things that are around it so we can begin to remediate the gun violence? Next slide. And so this is what it looks like. And so one of the things that we are doing and that we started at the initiation of the roadmap, we're continuing, is a CompStat model of problem solving. And we're calling them our tactical meetings. Our tactical meetings bring together a police at the center to address what the issues that they are seeing, and city services wrapped around them to not only utilize enforcement as a means of solution, but also kind of how are we utilizing our programming in Parks and Recreation? What are we doing around family supports and behavioral health? How are we utilizing and targeting our efforts around CLIP and sanitation? They were spending time every week with these operating departments. And what we've done to enhance this work is add our community partners in these neighborhoods, and our stakeholders are moving the needle with us. And how are we making resource investments, not just money, but capital, people capital, and system capital to make sure we're focusing on their efforts in the right way. Next slide. And we've talked about this being a public health issue, and we really needed to put, how do I want to say, put our money where our mouth is. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Abaya, my co-chair, to talk about how we're applying our public health framework.
Thank you so much, Erica. Thank you all for joining. So we just wanted to bring us back to this HAD matrix that we introduced the last time that we had this press conference, which gives an overview of how we plug the initiatives that are present on the ground in Philadelphia in various sectors, whether it be public or private, and how we understand how they're contributing to the factors that drive violence. So just as a brief overview, our focus is on pre-event factors. So ultimately, if we're going to take a true public health approach, our focus should be on addressing issues that prevent violence before it happens, rather than issues that, or programs that specifically address the response to violence. So the pre-event factors are where we would like to concentrate our effort. But we recognize that within the pre-event factors, there are some host and human interventions. We need to talk about the guns. We have to address the physical environment and how the physical environment might be a driver for violence. And then we also have to talk very honestly about the social environment that contributes to what facilitates violence interpersonally. So those are the 4 sectors that we're focusing on. The way this is working, as a reminder, is that all of the different agencies and programs that are present on the ground in Philadelphia are partnering with us to plug in their program areas into this matrix. What that will help us do is be able to identify where we have holes and where we need additional investment. And so if we can identify that we have a great deal of work ongoing to address the individual human level factors in the pre-event space, but we really don't have enough that we think is addressing the physical environment space, that's something we can easily see by plugging it into the matrix. And that helps us to direct our efforts, our evaluation, and our resources where they're gonna matter most. So I just wanted to make sure that we created that tie between the programs that you'll hear described from Erica's team and the work of making this a public health framework. Thank you so much, Erica.
Thanks, Dr. Abaya. Next slide. What is key to sustainability of this work? What is key to making sure what we have works is how we invest our time and our efforts in our community partners. One of the biggest parts of this in our success is gotta be our engagement with community. And so we're gonna go over kind of what we're doing and how we're starting this work and how we would continue to have our community engagement as a key benchmark to our success. Next slide. A number of the engagement programs that we have, and I mentioned some of these in our last press conference, we wanted to kind of tie it back to the importance of the roadmap. You heard me talk about our Next Gen Task Force. This is a group of young people we are bringing together citywide who are giving us input on our strategy, as well as we're giving them input and support in the work that they're doing in their neighborhoods, because they have the trust in the ears of those who are at the highest risk of shooting and being shot. We've stood up our social media platform for the first time. And so we know that social media is a means by which folks are communicating. And so we're gonna have social media influencers who understand the language of social media that are gonna support us in building our brand and our messaging. We are going to continue to come here and talk to community and to the media about the progress that we are making and the supports that we need for this work. And so we will continue to have our bi-weekly briefings. In addition, we're going to go out to community. We're going to do our quarterly updates with the community now that we're getting safer, now that we're opening up, and I, like many others on my team, are fully vaxxed. We're gonna meet people where they are. And this is not going to be standing on a podium. This is going to be meeting in a circle and building together. We also know that we need to engage our faith community. So if you are a faith leader or you're part of an active member of your congregation, know that we are going to provide a way for you to help us heal our community through our I Need You to Survive campaign. And what we're in right now is our gun violence our Youth Gun Violence Prevention Week. So we've been holding a number of events in community, and we've been speaking to a number of organizations. And tonight I am hosting and moderating a conversation about women in the crosshairs and the effect that gun violence has on women. And if you check out Philly Alive 215, you'll see the events for the rest of the week. This is just an example of the ongoing engagement that we'll be doing throughout this year, next year, and as long as I sit in this seat with community. And last but not least, the proliferation of guns is an issue, and we all know this, and PPD is going to talk about that a little bit more. But what we can do from a community side is really talk about the implications of straw purchasing in communities. And so we're going to do an awareness campaign before the end of the year to really, in partnership with the health department, to talk about what the implications are and bring awareness to this and how it is affecting our community in the issues of gun violence. Next slide. And so a lot of you know that I've done not only work here in Philadelphia, but also on a national level. And there are a number of models that are out in the country that we want to try here in Philadelphia. And the first of those is Ready. And Ready is a model designed to decrease shootings and homicides among those who are at the highest risk of gun violence. This program seeks to create new opportunities for these individuals so they can change their life trajectory, decrease their involvement with the criminal justice system, and by relentlessly engaging them and connecting them with not only transitional jobs and support services, but the key is how are we addressing their trauma and working with them through cognitive behavioral therapy. This also will help to build a sustainable infrastructure at the community level to promote long-term safety and engagement in some of our most vulnerable communities. Next slide. So how do we measure this? How do we talk about our key measures to success? This is what we're striving for. We're striving for 100% of known victims or their families will be offered services in 10 days after a shooting, and those interested will be connected within 7 days. What we have to strive for is 100% of known individuals who are involved in gun violence being offered another route, being offered an opportunity for a job, education, and other supports. And lastly, in partnership with PPD, we have to lower our shootings. We are at a historical astronomical rate in 2020. We know we have to get that down. And we know if we continue our efforts, we continue to work together, we continue to make these investments, we hope and we pray that we will have a reduction of shootings by 30%, which we believe is achievable by 2023. Now, these seem long off and they seem far off, but it's 2 years away. But there are benchmarks along the way that we are going to achieve. You are going to see us continually to put out these benchmarks and the pivots that we have to make in order to have safe and healthy and hopeful communities. Next slide. And so I urge you to continue to promote the work that we're doing, to support the communities that are community members and community leaders that are promoting this work. And with that, I am going to pass it to my partner in peace, Pastor Caldwell.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Erica, for everything that you're doing. And I just want to shout out the mayor's office for just being a listening ear. And Erica speaking about the Next Generation Task Force, in which we've put together. Oftentimes we hear from people about the on the ground leaders, or people say boots on the ground. I call them on the ground leaders on the ground. And we hear about the work that people are doing. And, you know, a lot of times we just stay anonymous with such leaders. What Erica has done, and she's done a phenomenal job of her being what we call the czar. And she's doing her research and homework and doing her due diligence to really find out who are these people on the ground. So this Next Generation Task Force is comprised of about 7 to 8 leaders right now throughout the city of Philadelphia. We tackle and cover the grounds of intervention. So we have a few leaders, including myself, who are really on the grounds, out there, you know, late nights into the early mornings, responding to shootings, working with guys who may be what people call perpetrators of crime, trying to see to it that we can get the tension eased and somewhat have these beef squashed. We also have people who are educators, focusing on the areas of education, entrepreneurship, also mentorship. We got mentors too as well. Leaders who really have ran great, brilliant mentorship programs throughout the city of Philadelphia. So we cover the grounds of Southwest Philly, North Philly. We got the Northwest area. We also have Southwest and West Philly. So legitimately, we're covering all bases. And of course, we're opening the doors for more leaders to join us. We see a lot of people that provide critique about, you know, what is the city doing in relation to connecting with young leaders. To be honest, I'm probably the oldest person, you know, as far as leader on this Next Generation Task Force. I'm 36, for those that are wondering. I know I look 21, but we legitimately have somebody as young as 17, a 17-year-old young woman who, I'm sorry, 18. She just turned 18. Phenomenal young woman who has her ear to the grounds. She has the heartbeat and the pulse of young people. She's very engaged in community. So again, this is a very, very diverse task force that we have. We're addressing all the needs. Erica is extremely right and correct, and the city approach is correct in regards to staying connected to community. One thing that I cringe when I hear people say is, where are the resources? Where are the resources? Truth of the matter is, there are a lot of resources out here. There are a lot of different things, the city agencies that provide stuff. But one of the biggest issues, y'all, is the connectivity to this generation out here. So we're doing, as a task force, we're rooted and challenged with the task and the burden of going out, and we're connecting and communicating everything that the city has to offer. So like, we're working hand in hand. We're having meetings bi-weekly right now, staying in touch with Erica, Shondell, OVP, and just staying, we're staying educated on everything that the city has to provide, so that us as a task force, as we cover the ground in Philadelphia, we're not just going out to our people trying to push messages of hope or just trying to encourage people to leave the corners or get out of the street life, but we want to provide tangible resources. So we want to make sure that we cover every area and every aspect and phase of the game. We want to provide that education. We want to provide various grant opportunities. Just heard about the city or the state providing grants for hospitality loans and all kinds of stuff for businesses. That's the stuff that we as this task force, we want to carry that task and that burden to keep our communities afloat on what's out there, what's available. Because again, there are things that are being made available to people, but unfortunately our people are perishing for a lack of knowledge. And it's honestly that lack of communication. It's that bridge that was missing. So this is what we're doing. We're becoming that bridge. We're also the hands and feet. And we have no problem doing this, because this is the stuff that this task force, each individual leader has already been doing for years in Philadelphia, off their own dime, off their own, missions and initiatives. So we're amplifying the work of some great young leaders, talented, brilliant young minds. And I'm excited because I honestly believe that we've had full support of the mayor's office, Eric, and everyone else. And we're going to do some great work. We've been doing great work. And right now it's like we're really amplifying each other's work. And, we're a family, and we're going to build upon this family, and we'll do what we need to do. So thank you for your time. And that's what we're doing. And, continue to look forward to doing some great work.
Thank you, Pastor, and thank you, Erica. Pastor, we apologize for the video problems in the beginning, but we were glad we got to see your smiling face there halfway through. We are now going to turn things over to Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw. Commissioner.
Thank you, and thank you, Pastor Day. Before I go on to discuss Operation Pinpoint, I want to briefly take a moment to thank our police dispatchers who play a role in providing support to our officers on the street. This week is National Public Safety Telecommunications Week. And thanks to our friends at Rivers Casino and Operation Gratitude, we were able to show them our appreciation for all that they do by preparing care packages. In addition to that, as Erica Atwood mentioned in her presentation, the PPD is also hosting activities to directly address our most vulnerable population during Youth Violence Prevention Week. The number of children falling victim to gun violence is absolutely devastating. And as we all know, on Monday evening, yet another child was shot. Regardless of why, in this instance, the home was targeted, this 9-year-old boy was innocently standing inside of his own home when gunshots rang out outside of his home. Thankfully, this little boy is expected to recover from the physical trauma, but the basic psychological need to feel safe have been robbed of him and his family. We can't allow our children to continue to be victims in these senseless acts of violence. This young boy is one of 54 children so far this year to have been struck by gunfire. These children continue to be victimized and traumatized as a result of the continued violence in this city, and we need to continue to work together as citizens, police, stakeholders, in order to stem the tide of the alarming amount of gun violence that we're expecting. As such, our Community Relations Unit is spearheading the interactive, the Eddie Eagle Gun Safe program. This is happening at recreational centers throughout the city for children grades pre-K through fourth grades, pre-K through fourth grades, with instructions on what to do if they come across a gun. Gun safety starts at home, and unfortunately, throughout the years, and as we've seen recently, young lives have been lost or changed forever as a result of accidents that take place within homes when a child finds a gun. For more information on this initiative, please feel free to contact PPD Communications Director Elko Battamurillo, he's gonna kill me, at police.public_affairs@phila.gov. We also know, moving on, that studies around gun violence show that there needs to be a multifaceted approach to addressing the root causes of gun violence. And last week, led by the acting U.S. Attorney, federal agencies pledged to help us, the PPD, combat violent crime. This initiative includes enhanced information gathering and sharing between local and federal agencies. This is yet another tool in our toolbox and another way of utilizing our interagency partnerships to improve our practices and eventually case outcomes that will be measured in years instead of months. This is all meant to keep Philadelphians safer. The PPD's approach to violent crime reduction includes strategic planning, community engagement, and these interagency partnerships aimed at improving the quality of targeted policing and investigations. We are an active stakeholder in the roadmap to safer communities, and we remain committed to working towards its success. Operation Pinpoint that we've been talking about is a key strategy, it's our strategy in the roadmap for safer communities. It combines hotspot policing, problem solving, community policing, and offender focusing. The data, along with our technology and experience, helps us pinpoint violent offenders in our communities. Now, while Operation Pinpoint has experienced many successes, we all know there's more work to be done. As of today, the city has had 142 homicides, % increase over this time last year, and our shootings are up 43% over last year. Although there are increases overall, we have seen some successes with our Pinpoint strategy. The numbers of homicides are down 24% within our Pinpoint grids. And although the number of shootings are up in our Pinpoint grids, shootings in the Pinpoint grids are still significantly lower than shootings in non-Pinpoint areas. And Commissioner Dales will continue to talk about that later on when you hear from him. I want to be clear here, though. Although we've seen an overall reduction of crime in our area, violence that persists throughout the city is still absolutely unacceptable. We know that not any organization on its own can reduce this crime epidemic, but with full support of our internal and external partners, stakeholders, and the community, we will hopefully begin to turn this tide of violence. Community leaders such as Pastor Day play an absolutely critical role in helping us identify problem spots that need our attention. They can also help us identify possible or known offenders in the community. That's why it's so important for our citizens to remain involved and invested in curbing violent crime in their neighborhoods. Sometimes just providing the police with a tip is all we need. And again, I will encourage anyone with information on crime in their neighborhood, from drug dealing to illegal speakeasies, to call their districts and make a roll call complaint, to call our tip line at 215-686-TIPS, or to dial 911. Now, here to further discuss the PPD's current response to gun violence and investigations of violent crime and coordination with our federal partners is Deputy Commissioner Joel Dales, Deputy Commissioner of Patrol, and Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, Deputy Commissioner of Investigations. Commissioner Dales.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mike, can you pull up the slides, please?
You bet. Stand by for 1 second. Can you see that?
And all I see is the Liberty Bell.
There you go. How's that?
There it is. Okay. Next slide, please. All right. I will start with the citywide homicide and shooting victim stats. Looking at the top of the chart, year to date, as of April 11th of this year, Philadelphia had 557 shootings. And out of the 557, 138 were homicides. In comparison to last year, homicides are up 35%, 138 this year versus 102 last year. And shootings are up 43%, 557 versus 389 last year. Out of the 138 homicides, 31 occurred inside a residential building. It's not listed on the chart, but 6 of the homicides occurred inside a commercial building, which brings the total number of homicides that occurred inside to 37. Looking at the bottom of the chart towards the left, it shows the motives for the homicides. And the top 3 motives are still argument, drugs, and domestics, which is currently up by 63% in comparison to last year. Next slide, please. All right, this slide here shows from this week, which is 4/5 to 4/11. We had 15 homicides, 50 shooting victims, which include homicides, and 45 shooting occurrences. Shooting occurrences is an incident count where an individual or individuals were shot. So basically, we're counting the incidents, not the number of victims. Next slide, please. All right, this slide shows the comparison between citywide homicides and homicides that occurred in the pinpoint grids, which the commissioner touched on during her opening remarks. We have over 45 pinpoint grids throughout the city that were identified and established based on the data and intelligence that showed high levels of violent crimes within these grids. And if you look at the top chart, it shows citywide homicides up 35%. However, looking at the bottom chart, it shows homicides in the pinpoint grids down 24%. I would like to point out that since January of this year, the reduction has been consistent in the pinpoint grids and the numbers have remained in double digits. Next slide, please. This slide shows the comparison between citywide shooting victims and shooting victims in the pinpoint grids. Citywide shooting victims are up 43%, and the shootings in the pinpoint grids are slightly up by 5%. And again, we have been consistent with those numbers in the pinpoint zone remaining at single digits. Next slide, please. This slide shows the year in total VUFA arrests from 2017 through 2020. It also shows the total VUFA arrest year to date from January 1st to April 12th of this year. In 2020, we reached an all-time high for VUFA arrests that totaled 2,324. And so far this year, we are at 948 VUFA arrests. I would like to point out that 2 weeks ago, the last time we met, the VUFA arrest count was 816. If we continue at this pace, we will easily pass last year's total. Next slide. As of April 12th of this year, 1,735 crime guns were recovered in Philadelphia. And out of that number, 164 were ghost guns. And pretty much any gun recovered by the police as part of a criminal investigation is considered as a ghost gun. And I also want to note that the number does not include guns from buybacks or turn-ins. Next slide. And lastly, in reference to the ATV and dirt bike initiative from 3/20 to 4/3 of this year, we confiscated 153 vehicles. 86 of the confiscations were from the ATV and dirt bike initiative. So with that, I will now turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Investigations, who will speak about cases we wish to highlight. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Joel. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to highlight a recent investigation that was conducted by the members of our East detectives, along with our state, local, and federal partners. As you can see from the images that are up on the screen, this was a significant investigation, and it highlights the continuous and critical partnerships that we have with our local law enforcement partners. A little background: as a result of continuous and ongoing frequent violence in the city, but specifically in our East Division, in the 24th and the 25th districts, our Gun Violence Reduction Task Force, which is from our East Detective Division, initiated an investigation that utilized support from numerous units from both within and outside of the police department. Investigators turned to the Philadelphia Police SWAT Unit, Canine Highway Patrol, Narcotics Bureau, our East Violence Reduction Unit, and our Criminal Intelligence Unit, along with our local partners from SEPTA Police, Juvenile Probation, as well as our state partners at the Pennsylvania Attorney General's Office and our federal partners through the Drug Enforcement Administration Task Force. This investigation culminated with a coordinated series of search warrants that were served 1 week ago on April 7th. On the 7th, detectives from our East Detective Division Gun Violence Reduction Task Force executed 15 warrants at numerous locations to recover firearms from prohibited offenders in the city of Philadelphia, primarily in East Division, as I said. The task force detectives, in cooperation with our state, local, and federal partners, recovered 7 firearms. These 7 firearms included 5 handguns, 1 AR-15, and 1 shotgun. You can see the image of that on the left-hand side in the top corner. As well as 2 improvised explosive devices, as you can see from the images on the screen. And we also recovered narcotics. These warrants led directly to 3 arrests. And because of this initiative, a parolee who had a prior murder conviction was found to have a handgun and was subsequently arrested. The coordinated efforts of all these resources resulted in the removal of numerous deadly weapons, which prevented further gun violence in the city. Now, in addition to the close partnerships that were on display in the noted seizure of guns and drugs, as you have on the screen, I also want to highlight a close partnership that we have with the U.S. Marshal Service. And if you can flip to the next display, just this week, our federal partners at the United States Marshal Service initiated a new program to assist our police department in apprehending fugitives that have been charged with murder. On Tuesday, the U.S. Marshal Eastern Pennsylvania Violent Crime Fugitive Task Force announced its 10 most wanted homicide fugitives in the Philadelphia area. What's different about this is that the cash rewards are being offered for anyone with information that leads directly to the arrest of these fugitives. Just the arrest, it doesn't have to be a conviction. The reward payment process will begin immediately after the arrest is made, and all information is anonymous and confidential. The fugitives that are being sought have active felony warrants for murder, and all of the individuals have lengthy criminal histories and should be considered armed and dangerous. We believe that this new incentive announced by the Marshal Service will help us bring dangerous fugitives to justice, and it will reduce violence in the city. I want to be clear that tips to this Marshals Fugitive Task Force can be called into the Marshals tip line at 1-866-865-TIPS, which is 8477, or to the United States Marshal National Tip Line at 1-877-WANTED-2, or online at www.p3tipstips.com. I also want to remind everyone that along with our Marshal Service tip line, anyone in the city can always help to identify and locate dangerous criminals by calling the Philadelphia Police Tip Line, which is 215-686-TIPS or 215-686-8477. And again, if anyone has information of a dangerous person on the street, they can also call 911. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mike Dunn.
Thank you, Deputy. And we had a request in the chat from one of the reporters. Oh, I see. They have responded with that question taken care of. Very good. So for now, we will move on to the Q&A portion for members of the press. In addition to Mayor Kenny and our other speakers, we are also joined today by Managing Director Tumar Alexander. Because of limited time, only one representative from each media outlet is permitted to ask questions, and we're asking you to limit your questions to 3 or fewer for the first round. Today, we're limiting topics in the first round to questions related to the presentations you just saw, including, of course, the new roadmap for safer communities. If there's time for a second round, we'll open it up to other topics. And for now, let's get started with Aaron Moselle of WHYY. Aaron, you can unmute.
Okay, you can hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So you, Erica, this question's for you. You ran through a bunch of new parts of this plan. Is there any numbers you can put to what you talked about? I mean, you talked about expanding CCIP and GBI, expanding blight remediation, expanding services to folks reentering, and just wondering kind of, are we talking about more money? And if so, how much? And if we're talking about more manpower, how much? How many more staffers are we talking about in these cases?
Yeah, so Aaron, with regard to CCIP and GBI, the investment is 1.3 million. We've not done the arithmetic on what that translates to for job services and manpower yet. We are in the process of doing that in the next week or two, given the budget address and the hearings that are coming up. But we will have that, and we can get to that to you as soon as we've done that math. With regard to reentry and some of the other things that I've mentioned. Some of it is already in the budget, so they're not new investments, particularly the NRCs. They've been in our budget for a few years now, and some of this is actually in the report.
Page 8.
And yeah.
Page 8.
He was saying page 8. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. And so in addition, some of it is just realignment of the resources that we have, particularly around community engagement, is we're reassessing how we're spending our time and our energy and the monies that we do have to have a deeper impact.
And so is that broken down in the latest roadmap? I mean, just sort of what's new funding and what's shifted funding? Okay.
The new funding, yes.
Okay. What, just real quickly, in terms of the 1.3 million, what was it last year? I mean, what was the budget, or we're just trying to get a sense of how much money we're actually adding?
Is Vanessa here or Evangela?
Evangela is, but I don't, if Evangela can't tackle that,
Yeah.
Aaron, if you could email press@phila.gov with that question, we'll get that to you. Okay.
Sure thing. Okay.
Are you good for now?
Yes.
I wanted to go to Purple Blackwell, who had her hand raised at the start. Purple, if you could unmute.
Okay.
You're on.
All right. Yep. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So my first question is in regards to the addition of the police presence at the rec centers. Is there a specific time that they are actually there? And there have been some resident complaints that they have not seen an increased presence, specifically at like Parkside Evans at 53rd and Parkside Avenue. And generally, they're not seeing, they know that there has been increased presence at Christie, but they can't. When is it exactly that we're seeing this police presence is the first question.
Commissioner Dales, I'll go ahead and give that to you.
Yes, the presence are during the hours of operation. That's when they are present at the rec centers. And it's not every rec center, it's 120 rec centers throughout the city. We decided on which rec centers will have stationary beats, which we reached out to Parks and Recs. And I wanted them to send me to prioritize a list of the rec centers where we definitely need a police presence. And on top of that, I also had the captains submit their request on which rec centers they believe needs a constant police presence. Now, throughout the city, we do have patrol officers on bikes, officers on foot, making periodic checks of these rec centers. So not all rec centers will have stationary beats. And now that the plan is not fully implemented. Once the summer begins, we will have additional resources. We're getting help from our other law enforcement partners to assist us. But in the meantime, what we have been doing from the weekends on, from Friday through Monday, we have been covering down on the rec centers with overtime beats as well, meaning we paying officers to work extended tours to cover these rec centers.
Thank you. And then I guess this is a general question that maybe for two more. And Mayor Kinney, there is a public outrage in regards to these public hearings that the public has no access to these meetings more than, if it was a regular time, not COVID, they'll be in the, in the building expressing their questions, their needs, their outrage, but they can only watch and they're not able to even get their questions answered on Facebook. How are we responding to our citizens who want to be involved in these briefings?
What we committed to do from recently was to provide briefings to the public through the press. Certainly as we get further along with our vaccinations and get in-person stuff back, we will have those public hearings, and I'm sure City Council will have public hearings. But right now, it's not safe to be in person. And if I don't know how unwieldy it would be to open up this particular briefing to anybody who wants to log on and express their opinion, I don't know how effective that would be. So what we ask people to do is watch the streams on the various media outlets, and the public is the public's questions hopefully are being asked by the press, which is what their function is. So as we get more and more ability to meet in person, we will do so. And right now, this is what we're able to do, and this is what we're asked to do.
Thank you. Then last question is in regards to the new budget, and people are asking. There's a state program, Safe Cam, where they can actually provide cameras for citizens. Also, BCA has a plan for Light It Up. What are we doing about the accessibility to cameras and maybe providing cameras to citizens so that they can catch the crimes on their streets and then turn over these footages to the police?
Well, I submit the budget formally to the council tomorrow. I'm sure we'll have differences of opinions through the course of the public hearings. And that's where we work that all out and come up hopefully before July 1st or 30 days before with a PICA requirement, 30 days before then, with a budget that everybody agrees on, and we can have that conversation in that process. And that's what that process is for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Purple. We're going to go now to Denise Clay Murray of the Philadelphia Sun. We only have about 10 or so minutes left. We should be able to go a few minutes past 2, but we ask everybody to keep their questions as tight as possible. That would be great. Denise?
Hi, my first question is for Mayor Kenny. Yesterday, City Council announced a series of violence prevention and opportunity things that they would like to see as part of the budget. Before announcing, the changes to the roadmap, did you have a chat with council? And what about what they're proposing and what you're proposing has meshed? Have you all sat down and had that conversation?
We have conversations weekly. We talk about these things, this issue and other issues. My understanding of the borrowing the council was proposing was originally for housing and neighborhood preservation. We have to get some more fleshed out ideas from them as to how they see that as a violence reduction program. Certainly we have a exceptional need for affordable housing and for housing for people who are homeless and keeping neighbors from being gentrified. And I think that's a terrific use of resources. We'd have to get more details from them on what the violence reduction parts of that are.
Okay. And my next question is from Ms. Atwood. You mentioned that one of the things that you want to be able to do as part of these changes to the roadmap is talk more directly to people in neighborhoods to make sure that they understand where it is you all are coming from. So I guess, could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. I think as it becomes safer, as folks are gathering in person more, it's particularly through later spring and summer months, is actually going into community and hosting community meetings at rec centers, on fields, in parks. This is some work that I've done before. I was doing in my previous position. We've hosted roundtable conversations in our communities, and that's what I want to continue to do.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Denise. Let's go to Mike Donofrio of the Philadelphia Tribune.
All right, thanks. So I'm just looking for a clarification on the budget numbers, right? So 18.7 million in new investments or new funding, but how does this just make up for funding cuts for fiscal year 2021 to 2021? So I'm kind of looking for what was like the total investment for fiscal year 2022 to kind of compare, what you were doing and what you planned on doing.
Kumar, do you have that in front of you?
No, I mean, some of this, Mike, is some of this is reinvesting for programs we had to cut. There are bigger pieces in this, like 911 triage and the co-responder model, our mobile crisis unit, which is the mental health providers. That's about a little bit under 13.2 million. They are new. There are new programs that we're putting new resources, not new programs, but there are programs we're putting more new resources in. Transitional jobs, the Ready model is also a new program that we didn't have, and that's about $2.3 million investment. So we'll get you the details about what we spent on violence prevention last year and these new investments, but it isn't only all just restoring cuts.
Okay. And now maybe just reflecting on the last 2 years, Mayor Kenny, what do you think was the biggest misstep that your administration made in its attempts to reduce violence, considering where we are?
I don't think it was a misstep. I think it's what happened to us all, what happened to the country. The entire criminal justice system shut down. I think you may have been in the city at the time this was all happening, but the courts weren't working. Probation and parole wasn't working. We weren't able to interface with people on GVI and other things. It was 2020. It was a worldwide pandemic where we lost 3,000 people. We are now getting people vaccinated. We're getting back into where we were and getting out into the communities, and we'll make up for that lost ground. But there was a pandemic, and it's affected every city in the country.
All right, just to be clear, so your plan is not to blame it all for the increase in gun violence, or
No, I'm not blaming anything. I'm telling you what the facts of the matter are. We were not able to interface with people on a regular basis. Courts were not operating, so people were running the streets that could have been adjudicated, and probation and parole was not supervising the people they should be supervising, making them more at risk for either being shot or shooting someone, and they were facts of life. And now, as we come out of the pandemic and we go back into hopefully some type of normal life, we will get back to those things, plus what we're trying to do with increased investment.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Let's go to Pat Loeb of KYW News Radio.
I have a two-part question. I'll do both parts at once, and I guess it's either for Erica or one of the police officials. But the PowerPoint says that the goal is to reduce violent crime by 25% through Operation Pinpoint. But Operation Pinpoint has been used for years as violent crime has risen. So I wonder what the difference is. What you think the difference is that's going to suddenly cause Operation Pinpoint to be successful in reducing crime. And number two, what solace is there in seeing crime go down in pinpoint areas if citywide the numbers are going up?
I can jump in really quick. Hi, Pat. I can jump in really quick from the PD standpoint. So what we're talking about, we're looking for a 25% reduction in 3 years. So we know that if we achieve a 25% reduction over a period of 3 years, that overall we're going to see a citywide reduction. So we're going to have to chip away at this year overachieve the reductions that the mayor is looking for at the end of a 3-year period. So we know that the successes that we're seeing in Pinpoint in time will show us success in the long term.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Let's go to Anna Orso of the Inquirer.
Hi, everyone. The decision to move the roadmap to safer communities, I guess, out of the Office of Violence Prevention and into Erica Atwood's office. Sorry, Erica, I forget the long title of your office, but can someone talk about that decision and what the reasoning is and the sort of anticipated impact?
Sure.
Yeah,
Hey, Anna. Oh, Tamara.
Go ahead, Erica. No.
Okay. And so Anna, so folks are clear, in my portfolio is the Office of Violence Prevention, the Office of Reentry Partnerships, Town Watch Integrated Services, and the Office of Criminal Justice. And so I supervise all of those offices. And when we talk about the core solutions to community violence, it comes at four key pillars. It is prevention, intervention, enforcement, and reentry. And when we talk about these departments that I oversee, all of them have a role in how we get to safer and healthy communities by reducing gun violence. And also, to elevate the importance of it, I report directly to the managing director. We have to have the power and the levers to be able to move this work in a way that has the impact that we need it to have. And that is why the decision was made to elevate this work. So it's not held in one department with minimal resources and manpower, but we elevated it so it's across multiple departments with the levers to be able to move departments outside of even my purview.
Got it. Thank you. And one other question, if somebody can just talk a little bit about the behavioral health crisis responder program. When does the city want to sort of fully launch that? And is that a program that people should anticipate working in tandem with law enforcement? So someone might expect, a police officer and a mental health professional to respond, or do they work separately?
So we are in our training phase of that program now. We go into the field in terms of training tomorrow. We will fully launch at some point in May, but we can get you some specificity around that implementation if you send us an email.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. Let's go next to Natasha Brown of CBS 3. Natasha, you're up.
Hi. This question is for the mayor. Just wondering, Mayor Kenny, just about the federal stimulus funds that will be used in the city and how they'll play a role in how you're kind of revising this roadmap to a safer communities plan.
Well, the federal stimulus money is helping us get back to where we were. It's plugging a lot of holes of revenue loss that we experienced in the last year plus. So that gives us some breathing room to make new investments or to return investments to these areas and to increase those investments. We're very thankful to the U.S. Congress and to the President and Vice President for all their hard work in getting all cities and states what they need to get back to a level playing field and then move forward. So it's not going. I don't think it's going to supplement it directly, but it supplements all the holes we had so that we can make these investments.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Natasha. And finally today, Jack Tomzik of the Metro. Jack, you're up.
Thanks. What I wanted to ask about the roadmap to safer communities, why did the plan need to be updated and why was it updated now? Can somebody speak to that a little bit?
Sure, Jack. And so with every strategy, you need to reassess. So when you have long-term strategies, you have to make assessments. That's just, that's a basic of implementation science. But given the apocalypse that we experienced in 2020, we realized that we really need to see where we are, not only budgetarily, programmatically. What are the needs that we're hearing and seeing from community? What are the root causes that we are understanding to be about the violence that we're seeing? Have there been pivots in that? And so we have to be malleable in our strategies to what is happening in real time. And given the enormous tidal wave of challenges we saw in what was to be our first year of implementation, we had to really seriously look at whether or not we were knocked off track, or if we needed to rebuild the track because it was washed away.
And were there any programs that you looked at and said, well, this wasn't really working, so we actually took resources away from that, or is that something that didn't really happen?
That's not something that really happened. We looked at kind of how we prioritize the investments that we do have. And so one of the things that, as an example of that, is really prioritizing our community engagement efforts and how are we addressing the needs for community in community, as opposed to saying, oh, just come to us. We've got to go to people where they are.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jack and Erica. And we are about to wrap things up, but we did want to thank Pastor Carl Day for joining us. And Pastor, I know you had some final thoughts.
Yes. Again, thank you all just for inviting me here and just giving me a voice to speak and platform to share with. I do want to say this to the press and to everyone that's watching this. Oftentimes, y'all, we cite the rising numbers of violence that continues to increase in our city. But I need us to understand something. Everybody here is working hard. And we cannot continue to measure effectiveness based upon so many things that are ever changing in the streets, things that are happening rapidly. And I'll certainly make myself available to talk to people if you really need to understand the deep dichotomy of what's really going on out here in the streets. But I do want to state this. The Target Investment Grant, I know personally many organizations that have benefited from it, who have done tremendous work. There are people who are doing great work in the city. And what we don't speak about enough is how many lives that we save on a day-to-day. Every single thing that everybody is doing in our city, y'all, is saving lives because we're keeping children off the streets. And that is not measured enough. I know that we see the homicide numbers and we see the shootings increasing, but at the same time, there are twice as many people or 3 times as many people that are being reached through various programs, various leaders throughout the city, where we're keeping lives off the streets. We're taking guns away from people's hands, stuff that we can't publicize or address. So I need the city at large to truly understand, trust me, this stuff can be much, much worse, but we're on the grounds. People are doing great work. I appreciate, again, the mayor's office for really, really listening, and them helping and getting behind us and helping us to assemble this team, this next generation task force. We're going to continue to do great work, but please keep that in mind. There are tons of mothers, tons of families that can vouch for the fact that their children are somewhere being safe right now in the city of Philadelphia, even as we've tried to be innovative throughout the pandemic, because it has hindered and hampered our effectiveness because we can't gather. So please keep that in mind, y'all. And we're going to do our best, but you have to understand that there are tons of children and men out here in these streets that are being reached every single day in Philadelphia. So lives are being saved. And I know we're losing some, but at the same time, we're going to keep working. So thank y'all for your time.
Thank you very much, Pastor, and thank you everyone for joining us today. That concludes this briefing. They are every other week on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. And the next one then will be on April 28th. Thank you again.